thanks for joining us tonight. We are super grateful to have everyone on the call. We're happy to be able to present our Crazy Stressed talk tonight. Dr. Bradley was part of our May series, and so back by popular demand, he has come back to do part 2 of Crazy Stressed. So let's do a little housekeeping before I introduce Dr. Bradley. So as most of our presentations, if you've sat through them before, we have our basic disclaimers here. So please be aware that this is not to be construed as medical advice. And if you do need medical advice, please do connect with your healthcare provider. And so second part, this video and everything that's included in the graphics, in the handouts that we've shared, are property of either St. Luke's, of Dr. Bradley, or other respective licensors. So this video, even though we will have a recording of it, is for educational use, for personal use, and not for commercial use of any sorts. And then this program and the series in general, we are incredibly lucky that our St. Luke's McCall Foundation received this grant funding from the CDC. And so we are super excited to be putting it to good use towards mental health. We had our May series that was also funded by this grant series in honor of mental health awareness. In the September-October series is in honor of September's Suicide Prevention Awareness Month. So thank you to the foundation. For anyone in this live presentation, if you are unfamiliar with Teams, we have our conversation. You can either interact tonight by opening up your mic and asking questions directly, or you can also feel free to type them into the chat. You can see that little bubble. Depending on your computer, these icons may be across the top, or they might actually be across the bottom, just depending on how you are set up tonight. So look for those bubbles. Reactions, you can always send out a heart if you love something that Dr. Bradley says. You can applaud. There's all sorts of little reactions that you can send. And then tonight it is up to you. We're hoping for an interactive discussion, so feel free to ask questions directly to Dr. Bradley by opening up that mic. And then as far as a camera goes, you are welcome to have it on for that deeper level of interaction, or if you'd like to keep it off, that is perfectly fine as well. So let's go into introducing Dr. Mike Bradley. So I am just thrilled to have him back. I have enjoyed so much working with him both in May and September, and his energy and his kindness. And so Dr. Mike Bradley is a licensed clinical psychologist with a doctoral degree. Sorry about the dogs in the background. Never fails.
That's great. Tell my hey.
Yes, as something in our live performances, that's how we roll these days, right? So we have a doctoral degree in psychology from Temple University, and I will make this kind of quick. 30 years of experience working with adolescents. And then in addition to our Crazy Stress presentation tonight, Mike also has a lot of wonderful books, and what I have to say is the titles are what crack me up the most. So there's some fabulous titles in that are not necessarily listed here, but be sure to go to his website and check him out online. He is also certified as a master addiction counselor. So as you ask some of those tough questions about what you or your kids might be facing, he also has that experience under his belt as well. So we are just so thrilled to have Dr. Mike with us again, and I will turn it over to him.
Thank you so much for that great introduction with the background of the dogs applauding. That was terrific.
Of course.
Like that. So welcome, everybody. Just wanted to thank you parents out there for taking the time and investing it, hopefully well, in this second seminar that we've done for you folks at St. Luke's. And there's nobody out there more stressed than teenagers these days, than the parents of teenagers. Not telling you something you don't know. So I appreciate your putting the time and the effort into attending tonight. Speaking of time, Just a shout out, as they say, to the folks at St. Luke's for putting this together. It takes an awful lot of time and a lot of worry and energy to get these things together in a way that works well. So in particular, I'd like to thank Sarah Hagerly and Tiffany Dobbs and Dawn Callahan. These are the folks that are really biting their fingernails as we go into these things, particularly the unscripted ones like tonight. So I guess this will be Wednesday Night Live, right? Here we are from where are we? In Idaho. Okay. So if you see those folks in the supermarket, tell them, way to go. Please keep putting these things together, because as you've noticed, parenting teenagers is no job for novices. And we have research that shows that parenting teenagers today is an entirely different game than parenting teenagers back when you parents were teenagers. It's an entirely new world. I'm ex-military, use a lot of military metaphor, but we always say if you're going to do an effective job, you got to forget what you learned in the last intervention, your own experience growing up, and learn the new terrain, the new culture, the hearts and minds, all that sort of thing. So that's why we take the time to do these kinds of seminars, to try to give you guys the training that you need to get your kids through this time, which, not to be too dark too early, is such a difficult time for teenagers. I frequently say I would not have made it. I thought I was insane as a teenager in a difficult world. Nothing like what your kids are dealing with. I really do believe I would not be here today if I was growing up in your kids' world. So if you're feeling particularly out of control and crazy and scared, welcome to the club. You have lots of company out there. And we're here tonight to give you some more of the tools to help you get through those years. Last seminar, and by the way, if you in the audience haven't seen the first seminar we did last month, then I think these folks have it recorded, so you can punch it up, and that'll kind of give you what we call the classroom training part. And I'll try to not leave you in the dark. If you didn't see that, please stay on, because you'll get enough from staying on. You can go back and revisit some of the other things we did last time. But what we're doing tonight is taking this stuff we did in the classroom, if you would, last time, and applying it in the field, down and dirty. What's it look like? What are the issues? Exactly how do you apply these principles that are so easy to say and so hard to employ? And I've done both, raised two kids with lots of challenges, and I teach this stuff for a living. So I've done both. And let me tell you, teaching it is really easy. Doing it is really hard. So we're going to try to give you those skills, the tactics and the strategies to get through this. I'm going to chat a little bit in the beginning. We'll get to that in a second. And then we get to the best part of the evening, which will be your questions and hopefully my answers. A couple of rules on Q&A. First of all, when we talk about a kid, if you raise a question about a kid, of course, none of us are talking about our kids, right? Because our kids are all perfect. We all know that. So if you're saying, what would you do if your son was climbing out the window at 3 a.m., then we all know you're actually meaning to say your neighbor's kid, your cousin's third ex-wife's plumber's nephew's kid, never our children, right? Got it? Okay, cool. Second, and by the way, that reminds me, when I do this myself, I get to go to shrink cocktail parties. And there's a seminar you ought to do, shrink cocktail parties. They're a riot. But in any event, when my kids were still in the house and we were going through the terrible teen years, I'd always corner the latest rage shrink, it was on Oprah and all that kind of thing. And just had, she put out a rage book about, oh, it's easy raising teenagers. And I would say, do you mind if I ask you a question? Not about my kids, of course, but I have this case I'm working with. And then I would lay out the question. So all of us have that issue of feeling like we're alone, which I'll talk about in a second. And the next rule is, unfortunately, there is such a thing as a dumb question. What's the dumb question? It's the one you don't ask. that's really dumb in every sense of the word. So if you have questions tonight, please ask them. If, not all of us are brave enough to, go on live TV and pose a question, and I certainly understand that. But if you can't ask it tonight, get an answer. I'm sure the folks at St. Luke's can share resources they have, perhaps parenting groups or experts or whatever. You can throw me an email to my website, which is on the handouts that I think were sent out to you. And I do answer those things. Sometimes there's a delay depending on how bad things are in this area with teenagers, but I will get back to you. But don't let the question go unasked. The risks are too high today. So chase those questions. So the loneliness factor, and the reason why I want you to ask the questions, is parents don't share the real deal with each other. It's sort of like, everybody plays the side A of their lives on Facebook, the good side. Very few people talk about how difficult it is. Because the one common factor we find in parents of teenagers is we all feel like fools and failures because it is so difficult. And the questions are maddening and there's no clear answers. And we're up in the middle of the night, can't sleep, going back and forth in our heads. It's just really hard. And it really helps if people share with each other. Some seminars I've done, places I've traveled to, parents after these seminars actually form, online chat rooms where they share stuff with each other. They can be anonymous, and they find it's incredibly comforting just to be hearing other parents struggle too. Because typically, if you're standing at the soccer sidelines, all the kids are out there running around. What do you hear? If you listen to the conversations, you hear the first parent saying, yes, our Sandra is considering the Johns Hopkins Summer Enrichment Program. They actually recruited her because of her talents in science. And the other one says, oh, really? Well, we were thinking about the Columbia program ourselves. That's what they say. If you could see the thought bubbles over their heads, first parent is saying, yeah, if she comes back from having run away last night in the middle of the night, out meeting God knows who, doing the devil knows what sort of stuff. Parents just don't share that stuff as a rule. So if you can, open up with somebody. It's helpful just to have somebody listen, but also there's a lot of wisdom out there, particularly with parents that have been through these fights. Last time, in the first seminar, we, as usual, I talked too much and we ran out of time, and I did not get to talk a little bit about one of the handouts that we have. Again, in military metaphor and parenting teenagers, we talk about mission, strategies, and tactics. Mission, what is your mission? Well, it's to help your kid get through these difficult years and be okay, in essence. We'll talk more about mission at the end. How do you do that? Those are strategies. Strategies are overall goals, kind of broad overlays that you should use when you're making parenting decisions. And one of the handouts you have is the 7 C's of resilience, which we talked about last time a bit. And those are your strategies. They're kind of broad goals. I want to touch on something we call the 10 commandments of parenting, which are tactics, which is the down and dirty day-to-day. What do you do when? So if it's okay, if the moderator gives me the sign, I'm going to jump into the 10 commandments, or would you rather I pause for, okay, got the up sign. Cool. I'm sorry. I couldn't hear you.
That's because I muted myself. Worried about what the dog was going to say in the background about it.
Scared me to death.
We could take just a really quick pause right here before we jump into the 10 commandments. Are there any questions from the attendees before we jump into the 10 commandments that are just right up in top of your head? Anything you want to say or ask Dr. Mike after that lovely intro? Okay, I know there's some official rule that you're supposed to give it X amount of seconds, but after you ask a question, but I think we're good. So yes, Dr. Mike, how about we jump in with 10 commandments? Thanks.
Okay, great. And those of you in the audience, if you want to punch up the handout, that's fine, or you can just hear me chat about it. and or if you want to show them on the screen, if you would like to. Okay, well, I'll just kind of continue and we'll see if they do appear on the screen. And I think your doggy muted again. So
You go
okay.
ahead and start talking and I'll work on pulling them up.
Very good. If you check your handout, you'll see the first one, commandment is thou shalt be as a dispassionate cop unto thy own child. What's that about? That happens to be the most important commandment. And that has to do with the standard question about how you discipline a child as a teenager, because they don't kind of respond well to standard discipline the way they might have when they were younger. So what we say is, as you consider what you're going to do to try to enforce rules, think about getting pulled over by cops. Let's assume you go through a stop sign and a cop pulls you over and he's having a really bad day. And he says, yes, Miss Jones, I can see by your bumper sticker that you're a teacher in the local school and you're probably late. Well, you're going to be a lot more late now, lady. And he laughs and he goes back to his car. And you can see him sipping his coffee and you're just stewing because you've got an uncovered classroom. And finally, he comes back and he says, so what happened? Did you have brakes fail? Sorry, that was Toyota's. And he tosses a ticket in the window and storms away, snarky and sarcastic. Who are you mad at? You're in a rage about the cop. You come home, you tell your partner all about this crazy cop, right? Couldn't believe he did this. I'm going to write a letter. He shouldn't be a police officer. You never mention that you went through a stop sign. The second day, you go through another stop sign, probably because you're angry still about the preceding day's encounter with the police. And this cop is a little different. And she says, I can see you're in a rush. I'll get you out of here as soon as I can. But this is a bad intersection. Please slow down. We pick up body parts here regularly. I'll get you. I'll be right back with you. And she comes back, hands you the same ticket as the angry cop. She hands it to you and says something like, I hope the rest of your day is better than this, meaning the ticket, but please slow down. It is indeed better to get there late than not at all. So when she walks back to her car, who are you mad at? Yes, yourself. That's the exact drill we want to pull off when we're disciplining teenagers. And that means you use consequences, not punishments. What are punishments? Those are things we make up after a kid does something stupid, and we make them up to try to make her feel bad. The kid comes home and you can tell she was drinking, and first be sure she's safe, monitor her, be sure she's not over the top. If you're in doubt, go to the ER, get her checked out. Even if it's a wasted trip and embarrassing, it makes the point that alcohol is dangerous to teenagers. In any event, so how do you handle that? By setting up a consequence for the next day. What you don't do is make stuff up. Give me your phone. You're grounded till you're 37 and a half years old. No prom for you. You always want to be sure that kids know in advance of doing something dumb, they know what the outcome is. And that's where you set up a consequence with them in advance in a talk with your kid. You have to talk about what happens if you drink at sleepovers, which is where it always almost happens first, sleepovers at other people's houses. I won't do that, Mom. It's great to hear that. However, if it does happen, what should we do? Well, I guess you should ground me. No, that's grounding's kind of silly. I'll tell you what, if it does happen, if you make that bad decision, then for 3 months, how about if you don't go to other kids' houses for sleepovers, you can have them at our house. And she explodes. I can't believe it. I can't have any friends. No. I want you to have your friends. I'm not trying to hurt you, sweetheart. I'm trying to save your life. So if you make a bad decision, you're telling the two of us that you're not ready for that level of freedom to be out in that situation. So to keep you safe, have your friends come here. I'll get the pizza and the movies and so forth. She'll start yelling, they won't come here. Gee, why is that? Probably because you wouldn't permit drinking in the basement. So always put the power in your kid's hands to make decisions in advance of something actually happening. And then if she makes the bad choice, Or when she makes the bad choice, you calmly, like that dispassionate cop, say, it's a shame, it's tough, but I know you'll get this. We're just going to stand down the away sleepovers for 3 months. But hey, if you do well, then you can do it again because you're smart, you're strong, you'll figure this out. Get the anger out of disciplining. Anger only becomes a distraction and it sets up a red herring. The kid just focuses on your anger and the bad things you made up after the fact, just like you'd be in a rage with the cop who made stuff up to punish you as he enforced the consequence of the ticket, which is the only thing the dispassionate cop did. Second commandment, I'll just hit a couple of these and cut me off, somebody, if I'm talking too long, you let me know. Second one is thou shalt listen, even as thy own child shouts. Teenagers, if you read up on this stuff, have underdeveloped brains and overdeveloped brains. What does that mean? The back of their heads, the emotional center, where things like anger, joy, sadness, sexual drives, aggression drives, particularly in the male, all that stuff is in the back of the head. We call it the child brain. In the front of the head, we call the adult brain or executive function center. That's the smart part. But Mother Nature plays this trick on us parents by overdeveloping the back of a teenager's head, underdeveloping the front. As they progress through adolescence, that front part starts to get more developed. And by the time they get to 18, usually 20, then they're much calmer. You may have noticed that if you've had older kids and more reasonable, able to self-regulate. Brain development doesn't finish up till age 25 in the males, mostly, 23 in the females. So you're playing for time, trying to keep your kids safe, have them learn how to self-regulate with the fences you put up, rules and regulations, while their brain develops. Part of what happens is in the early years, they go straight to screaming and raging. If you rage back, guys, we become another teenager. We don't become somebody that they would choose to respect. Teens are looking for people who aren't as crazy as they are. If we let our anger get the best of us, it ends the communication. If they're yelling, as long as it's not horrible curse words, hang in there, because as they yell, they will usually start to calm down and get to the real issue. For example, Christy comes home and just unloads on you. You're crazy. I can't believe you. You're a dinosaur parent. Other parents are much more understanding. Your rules, you don't let me out to go to the park on Friday nights, which is why I lost having Johnny as my boyfriend, because he was with Jane in the park on Friday night and my heart is broken and I feel really sad. So if you weather the shouting part, just let them run. Just be quiet and disciplined. They'll often get to the real thing that's bothering them. Jump to commandment 4.
Actually, before we jump to commandment 4, there was a question in the chat and
Okay.
and a comment that says good advice on holding your cool, but this kind of goes back to the first commandment. What do you suggest for drinking or drugs as a consequence if you didn't make a consequence ahead of time?
Oh, great question. Yeah, because it's really hard to make consequences ahead of time on everything. So what happens if you're behind the curve on that one? When she comes in, maybe stumbles in at 1 a.m. And again, assess for danger. Be sure she's able to talk. And you're going to have to monitor her for a couple hours, because sometimes kids today will take their little brothers or sisters' ADHD medications so they can drink more and look more cool. And then as that wears off, they can lapse into alcohol toxicity. So you're going to have to, have a bit of a sleepless night. But if it's been a beer or two kind of a thing, first thing is you do like the judge does. The judge will say, you're guilty, and come back and we'll tell you about the sentence later. Break those two things apart. How does that work? If it's 1 a.m., you're going to be a really bad parent. You're going to want to go nuts. I did. It doesn't work out well. So what you say to the kid is, I know you were drinking. We'll talk in the morning. She may press you. Well, you got to tell me, what's my punishment? And say, well, let me think about it. You think about it. We'll chat in the morning. They hate that, but it works really well because they got to think about what happened. The next morning, she comes down to the breakfast table, bleary eyed. You don't jump into consequences. Your first shot should be, tell me what you learned. Yeah, tell me what you learned. She'll look at you and say, what are you talking about? Say, well, in your experience, first time that you were drinking at this party in the park, what did you learn? You might strike gold. She might look down and say, I learned it's really sort of, I don't know, it's not cool the way I thought it was. Kids get crazy. There was people screaming and the guys wanted to fight each other. And then Johnny jumped on Susie and we had to pull him off her. The stuff tastes horrible. Somebody was puking. It was really hideous. Great. That's the gold. She's thinking about the reality, not about your punishment. She's learning important stuff. So then she'll say, well, what's my punishment? And you say, no punishment, sweetie. You learned. You learned what I wanted you to learn. She'll say, great. So I'm going to the park tonight. And you say, we got to talk. If this happens again, what should we do? And that's when you get to, she says, ground me, and you say, no. And you set up a consequence that's linked to the behavior. So in this instance, it would be, if it happens again, understand that you will not be going out Friday nights to the park. That'll be off limits. She'll start screaming, say, wait a minute, hear me out, for 3 months. And in 3 months, you'll be a different person. You grow a lot, 3 months as a teenager. And then we can try letting out the line again. And ask her, does that sound fair? If she says no, say, well, your objection was noted, but I'm sorry, that's the call, because I love you, not because you're a little brat, and, what's wrong with you, blah, blah, blah. It's because I love you. And terrible things can happen when teenagers drink alcohol. I don't want that to happen to you. So the bottom line is, on first offense with these things, unless it's something over the top, using heroin or opioids or whatever, another situation, you in essence give a pass on the first offense, set up the consequence for the potential second offense. And what you're really doing is putting the power in the kid's hands to determine his or her future. And that's the key. What you want them learning is that's the way the world works. The world, it's interesting. I have found if you pay your taxes, mostly obey the speeding laws, unless you're late for a seminar like happened last time, that's another story. And obey the rules, they leave you alone. It's pretty cool. You get to do like anything you really want. When you start breaking rules, you start to lose freedom. Break enough driving rules, like I almost did, you lose your license. They take that freedom away. Ultimate loss of freedom is going to jail, commit crimes. So you're trying to teach her, you have the power in your hands to determine your future by your choices. So that's the long explanation behind that first commandment. Get the anger out. Dr. Bradley has a hole in one of his cabinets in the garage where he was so upset that he had to go out and punch something before he sat down and spoke with his daughter. I write about this in my books, by the way, true stories. And I leave it there to remind me how hard it is for parents I work with to keep their temper when they're just really terrified about their child. What's the bottom line in that thing? Don't show the anger, show what's behind the anger. What's behind the anger is you're scared to death. You're terrified. But what we do as grown-ups, instead of saying, sweetheart, this scares me to death, and I'm so scared, I could have lost you tonight, we scream and yell, thinking that's somehow more powerful, which, if I can roll into the next commandment quickly, shalt not shout, speak thou wisely. Guys, the louder we talk, the less they hear. The more words we talk, the less they hear. Research shows young teenagers can pay attention to, get this, 5 to 7 words in a row with intensity, and then they start to lose their ability to focus. So, not to be sexist about this, but moms, how many words do you use in a row when you're upset with your kid. Yeah. So you got to become an incredible editor. Boil it down. They'll hear short, quiet sentences. And again, this requires the discipline. And if you're too upset to do that, go put a hole in one of your cabinets in your garage, and then come back and do it again with your kids. Okay, I'm going to pause there. Let me know if you want me to roll on, or is there another question?
Let's keep rolling unless somebody has a question. Feel free to raise a hand if you want to talk, or just open your mic and ask.
Okay. Well, you know me, I'm Irish. I can roll on all night. So here we go. The next commandment, it's true. Commandment 5, thou shalt remain loving and connected, even while being hated and avoided. This actually has to do with something called parental grief. And again, to be sexist, but it's true, men and women react differently. When kids hit that, early transition stage, used to be 15, then it was 14 and 13. Now we're seeing it at 11, where the kids are beginning puberty and the brain changes. And part of that is they get dark or reactive. The boys tend to retreat to their rooms. We call it going into the cave, start dressing in black, and they grunt. They no longer talk. You can't touch them. If mom tries to give them a hug, it's like, get away from me. You're perverted stuff. The girls tend to become more proactive with their negative feelings from their stress of becoming a teenager. Instead of going into the cave, typically girls will, shall we say, interact with mom or provoke mom. I've heard this one story so many times that where your previously stable, calm, predictable daughter, and you guys are real close, mom and daughter, you used to go out shopping together. Maybe you got those silly, dress-alike suits and all that stuff. And then suddenly, like overnight, she's a different creature and she don't like you anymore. And you're in the TV room and you hear her in the kitchen one day and she's in front of your pantry and you've got what, $10,000 worth of food in the pantry, and she's yelling and cursing and stomping and slamming things. And she is saying, I can hear the audience all together, there's nothing to eat. And you're dumb enough to get involved in this because this is your first time down the road of parenting a teenager, particularly a girl. So you go running in as a devoted parent that misses her child and tries to be helpful, saying, honey, calm down. There's a lot to eat. No, there's nothing. All you got is food for my creepy little brother. There's nothing I can eat. And you say, calm down. It's okay. Let's take a look. So let me see. Oh, look, we got a nice bowl of pasta. How about if I make you a good bowl? You love pasta. She says, pasta? Pasta? I know what you want. You want me to eat pasta and get fat so I won't have a boyfriend. I hate you. I hate this house. And then you're still trying to please and saying, wait, let me take a look. What about, look, we got tuna. Tuna's a lot of protein. Make you a nice bowl of tuna. And she says, tuna? I don't kill living creatures to sustain myself. You say, well, you killed a heck of a lot of them last week. That was last week. I'm a militant vegan this week. You're like, cool, that's great. I respect that. Let me see if we can find, what do we have here? Oh, look at this. I found vegan pasta. How about it? And she screams, there's the pasta again. And she slams the door and storms off. What does the mom feel? Well, stunned, but also grieving. I get so many, when I do histories with parents that come in, they're feeling grief because they feel like they've lost their child, literally. The moms can have this upsetment that they hate naming because they feel silly saying, I feel like my daughter is gone. And they grieve much as if they've physically lost a child. And it's a normal reaction. So moms identify that. And if you're dealing with that grief thing, and you'll have it with boys as well, get out the old pictures and a box of tissues as we did and start going through the tissues and, oh, remember this? Oh. have a good cry session about this sweet, loving child you used to have, and understand she and he will be back. You just have to fasten your safety belt and get them through this roller coaster ride of the next few years safely. And your child will be back. Trust me, almost always they come back as their brain matures and they get these things. But in the interim, they will hate you and avoid you. The moms are the ones who typically are truthful and say with tears, I feel like I've lost my daughter. The dads, we dads, we know how to handle these things. We say, the hell with him. I don't care about him. Yeah, let him be in his room. He's a punk anyway. Not because we're really bad people, but dads have a difficult time typically connecting with our emotions. So instead of saying, yeah, I feel really sad too, we say, hell, who cares? That's his problem. But the dads do care. Both mom and dad need to identify their reactions and keep selling even when the kid is not buying. Moms, keep offering hugs um, to your kid, even though he keeps saying you're a pervert, you're crazy. Say, yeah, I know. I miss you. And I have a hug for you whenever you're ready for it. Believe it or not, kids will tell me how sad they get when their parents believe that the kid truly hates them. The kid feels lost. They can't stop this developmental phase of moving away from the parents and hating the parents and so forth. It's just what they're stuck with. They need the parent to be above that. You just sort of nod and understand, say, yeah, I get that. But let me know when you want a hug or you want to go out for coffee or whatever. I'm here for you. That's very reassuring to them. Helps them feel a connection even when they seem to despise it. It's a point of safety.
So I've got another question in the chat.
Okay.
And it says, my son is in the cave mode. I want to chat with him. Simple things like you were suggesting, food, how was your day, schedules, how do we re-engage them?
Okay, great question. First, don't force them to interact with you. Do, again, keep reaching out, saying things like, I miss you. I really miss those times. So let me know, how we can spend a little time, go out, coffee, whatever. I'll tell you a couple of tricks I've seen and one I did. The tricks I wish were mine. One mom, her daughter had just would have nothing, wouldn't be seen within 10 linear feet of mom, kind of a thing. And mom couldn't stand it anymore. And she said, it wasn't in any book. I just acted on instinct. And she got 2 water pistols, filled them up, put them on a silver tray, and took them up to her daughter's room, knocked on the door. Daughter said, go away. And mom said, no, I'm coming in. I got to show you something. And she walked up to the daughter and said, choose your weapon. I love that. I wish I made this one up. And the daughter said, what? What do you mean? And mom said, choose your weapon. The daughter said, you're crazy. Get out of here. You're nuts. And mom said, okay. And she picked up one of the guns and started to squirt her daughter. The daughter was like, screaming. Finally, the daughter picks up the other gun, starts to shoot back. And mom said, and there we were, chasing each other, soaking each other in front of her son, teenage son, and dad, who were just staring what was going on and remembering that they actually love each other. Now, that's a little extreme, but it works. And it just shows the mom not quitting. The other one was a mom with the son in the cave that you're going through. And she said she couldn't stand it anymore. And she got out this purple lipstick she had and a sombrero, as she put it. Let me remember the quote, from an unfortunate trip to Tijuana, whatever that meant. So she has this sombrero. And the son was in the cave with his friends. So she puts on this purple lipstick and the sombrero, and she goes in and she says to the boy, give me a kiss, give me a kiss. And he's like screaming and, oh, you're crazy. And his friends are just falling out because the whole thing was so ridiculous. So now I am not that creative or dramatic, but with my son, when we went through this phase, because he was always on the computer talking to his 17 girlfriends. Um, and, he just could not get away from the computer screen. I said, I miss you, man. Can we, go out, get a coffee? Sometimes coffee works. They see that as very adult. And I know caffeine, blah, 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 get them decaffeinated. But they think it's very adult to go to the coffee shop. So how about if we go to the coffee shop? And he said, with you? I said, yeah. He said, like, no. And I said, like, why? Remember, they used to wag their heads and say, like, I said, like, why? And he said, like, somebody might see me there with you. I said, I'll tell you what, this was back when money was cheaper. So I said, tell you what, Ross, I'll give you $5 to go get a coffee with me. And he says, $5? And I said, yeah. He says, cash? I said, yeah. I said, show me the money. It was a movie that used to be out. So I give him the 5 and he holds it like it's a battle flag. And he's, walking out of the house with me and like humiliating me that I had to buy his time. 20 minutes later, he's talking away at the coffee shop. So find ways, end runs, creative ways of reaching out, and depending on the nature of your kid, whatever you do, don't quit. The quitting is disaster. That's when they start to spiral out in the deep space. As parents of teenagers, particularly in the tough years, we have to be like lighthouses, that kind of dinosaur thing that doesn't move, that light's always there, consistent, predictable, strong, uh, unending. And they navigate the stormy seas of adolescence by kind of orienting themselves to the light. I know that sounds more poetic than psychological, but it's true. So it's sort of a test of the relationship. It's easy to love them when they're loving. It's really tough to love them when you're into the conflict-based part of the relationship. So see it as a test and just show them this higher level discipline. Again, go out in the garage, punch holes in things, and come back and be that calm, controlled parent. Just don't quit. So did I talk too much on that one? You want me to move on? Or?
Nope, that was great. We also had a comment in there that somebody said, I took my boys for drives and they would chat. That was nice. Trapped in the car.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they get so bored, they'll even talk. That does work. Corner them in the car. Timing is key, though. First of all, mornings don't work. I hope you know that we're really worried because these kids don't sleep. That alone makes them crazy. Their brains typically are not even functional until 8 a.m. What time does school start in your region? We have kids that are getting up at 5 to make these buses that early in the morning, and their brains are really toxic. So don't insist they talk in the morning. Sort of understand they're literally in pain because of the issues with sleep. Something else we can talk about if somebody asks a question. And the other thing is don't ambush them when they walk in the door after school. They're sick to death of adults putting demands on them. The history teacher, the football coach, the principal, they're just tired of it. So give them a space, hand them a snack, get some blood sugar going inside of them, and give them that kind of break. And then go in and say, don't say, how was your day? That's a philosophical question. As adults, we understand the complexity of that and what it means. Kids don't. It sounds like a really stupid question to them. They complain about that to me all the time. But frame your question for them. Say, hey, if you got a minute, tell me something cool that happened today. Tell me something that sucked that happened today. We call it high-low. So if you frame the question, it's easier for them to find an answer. Part of the development that they go through that's really hard is being able to take complex concepts such as emotions and link them up with words that convey them well. They're really lousy at it. That's why often they'll scream and yell and you're wondering, what is this? That's because they're trying to figure out what it is, the real issue that they're upset. So do the timing thing well. But again, don't quit. If a kid says, just leave me alone, say, cool, I get it. I know it's a tough time, but I'm here and I love you and I miss you. Let me know. Want to make $5 the hard way kind of thing. Try one of those tricks.
Great, thanks. We're good in the chat for now.
Okay. Uh, the next one can be insulting. It's commandment 6, thou shalt not kill. Thou mayest entertain thoughts of killing, but truth and humor. The truth part is we can get so upset that we can put our hands on our kids. And not because they're terrible people, but often that's the way we were raised. And it doesn't work. If there's anything that's a definite proof about parenting, it is that when we get physical with kids, we just destroy our relationship with them. We lose ground. And we're not only not making ground, we're teaching them terrible things. Like this is a way you solve conflict, is that, whoever is bigger or faster or stronger is right. We don't want to teach that at all. Now, it gets confusing because I get in when I do the seminars in person. I'll always have some dads that argue this. And I like that they do that, by the way. And your questions that you're posing, I forgot another rule of Q&A is I'm Irish by birth, not by choice. And in my family, Q&A stands for quarrels and arguments. So if you want to argue what I'm saying and challenge it, please feel free. It makes it a much better evening. But when I'm doing these seminars live, the brave dads will raise their hands and say, I disagree with you. I think corporal punishment, spanking or smacking, that sort of stuff works. And my father used to hit me, and my football coach hit me, and my drill sergeant hit me. And I turned out to be a good dad. I provide for my family and help out and so forth. And so what's wrong with the hitting? The hitting establishes discipline. And I'll say, well, sir, tell me about your dad. And he'll say almost every time, my dad was an amazing man. He worked 3 jobs at one point to get us through school. Never had a decent pair of pants in his life. He was always giving it all away. Took care of the widow's family down the street, coached everything. I'll say, thank you for sharing that. It's a wonderful story, sir. You just told me about your father's heart, his character, his value system, his selflessness. Sir, you never mentioned the hitting. You overlooked the hitting. You forgave the hitting in light of the character of your father. The gold was his character. The hitting was a minor part. Luckily for you, could have been the major part. So dads in particular sometimes have a hard time not hitting. They feel like they're not being strong. And that's biological. We're programmed, hardwired to protect and control and, suppress any rebellion in the village and all that stuff in the house. So understand that is a disability that males in particular have that we have to work against. Did I mention the hole in my cabinet in the garage that I leave there as a memorial to remind me of how hard this is? But just don't go to the hitting. And if I haven't convinced you, the other thing is kids are hip to child protection law, and they will call up the cops. And the cops, if there's a mark on your child's face, they will take you out of the house, sometimes in handcuffs. And it's a nasty process. It's silly. It doesn't work. What you really want to do is teach them the higher level, saying conflict has to be resolved by communication, by sharing. Doesn't mean you always get what you want. What it does mean is that you can love and disagree. You can have conflict with people you love very much. So you would take a bullet for and also be upset with, be angry with. But if you don't let the rage into that discussion, then you're fine. It's okay to narrate the impulse. Say, sweetie, I feel like strangling you. I feel like, hitting you in the head saying, don't you get this? That's how upset I am because I'm scared for you. In other words, narrate the emotion. Don't become it. Because when we become it, we're actually becoming that child brain that I mentioned in your teenager's head. We can revert to that part of our own brain. And that just destroys, it blows up respect, it blows up learning. Just don't go there. If you can't avoid that, then do nothing. Get in the car, go to Dunkin' Donuts, get a coffee, disengage. Nothing good will happen when you have that level of emotion bubbling up in your throats. Should I push on or?
Looks like we just had a couple of questions pop in, so let's read those. What do you do about kids who bite, kick, etc.? Not mine. Laugh out loud.
Well, I wish I could get a response. I don't know what age you're talking about. Usually we're seeing that at younger ages. So it turns out, okay, it turns out that that's actually also something that kids will do naturally. And parents are horrified when the kids do it. But when they're young, they're testing it out. They are programmed to do that. Animals in the wild do that, and we are, half animals. Excuse me. So first, try not to freak out when the child does it. And again, back to the commandment we just talked about, do not ever put your hands on that child. Don't do the thing I've heard too many times about, I'm going to show them what it's like to get hit or kicked or bitten. No, 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 no. Rather, you can even set up a consequence system with a young child. It works just as well with younger kids. And that's where you teach a lesson with some words that they don't really get. You just say, I know you're mad that Johnny took your cookie. It's not okay to bite, kick, or hit. And I'll tell you what, to help you learn how to use your words, because it's okay to say to Johnny, I'm really mad at you. You took my cookie. That's fine. And it's important for you to say that. Not okay to hit. Say every morning, if it's a really serious problem happening a lot, say every morning you get through by using your words. And we call it showing respect. We use that word even at a young age. What does respect mean? Using your words, not your hands. Every morning you use respect, you will earn something, and it can be whatever is important to your kid. It can be money. Some little kids love money. It can be silly tokens and stickers. It can be a privilege. Find a creative way to have something they can earn. You don't want to, be giving them $20 every time they get through a morning. But one of the tricks is to use the McDonald's games. Do you remember the old games where there would be something, you would get this kind of outline, and every time you bought some McDonald's, you would get a tag that fit into, it was like a jigsaw puzzle, putting it in, and when you filled it all in, you got the prize. Same thing can be done. If a kid wants, a fire truck, you go online and find the fire truck he wants. You print out two pictures, one black and white and one in color. You post the black and white one on the refrigerator, and then you get the color one cut up into pieces. And every morning he gets through, he earns a piece. If he doesn't if he doesn't do the respect-based way of resolving conflict, the words, then he fails to earn the piece. You don't punish him, but you have it set up so he earns or fails to earn. This also applies to teenagers. So you put the power in their hands and help them wrestle with self-regulation to get the game pieces. So in a week's time, as he earns the pieces, you put them in a place. And when you fill in the whole card, he gets the fire truck. Your goal with young children and teenagers is self-regulation. How do you get self-regulation? Not by disincentivizing them, by hitting them or screaming or taking away things. That just builds rage and will make them more aggressive. What you're doing is saying, if you use the discipline, you earn stuff. and the power is in your hands, my child. You can get what you want by working on this. Good luck, I'm on your side. When they fail to earn the piece, don't say a word about it. When they come home from school and the teacher has, sent, you should have a system of feedback. Teacher says, bad morning, good afternoon. What you do is you say, great, you had a good afternoon. You put in the one piece. If the kid says, where's my morning piece? You say, I think it was a rough day, but you'll get it tomorrow. No lectures, no what's wrong with you. Just get a good um, earning program, a reinforcement kind of a thing, where they're earning stuff they want. It takes a little time, but then they learn to self-regulate, and that's the goal that they take with them the rest of their lives. Did you
So
need
another
any?
question that kind of sort of, I guess, on the flip side of not earning your rewards, what are reasonable consequences for a kid hitting other people, whether it's parents, siblings, or friends? And then she clarified elementary kids and junior high kids.
Same. Again, you're always trying to set it up so that the kid is wrestling in his own head with his child brain. Even small kids have an adult brain that, with stimulation, can become pretty powerful. So that's why we use these consequence systems where they earn or fail to earn things that they want that are important to them. What that thing is varies by the child. The term we use, it's a little too hoity-toity, is a significant reinforcer. What does that mean? Something that has importance that the kid really wants. So you negotiate with them, find out what they're really hot for. They may want the new video game, they may want the new controller, whatever, and you negotiate it. If it's expensive, again, have them earn the game pieces to get the expensive thing. But see, you're trying to take the conflict between the parent and the child away. What's that conflict? That's where you're always yelling or blowing up what's wrong with you. That's endangering. What you want to do is set it up so the conflict is in the kid's head. So if a teenager, you have something where he can earn the concert, he's a middle schooler and he's physical, and say, if you get enough game pieces, you've earned that concert you wanted to go to Friday night. Good luck, I'm rooting for you. If you get to Friday and he's had a bad week and not able to get to the concert, what do? And you say, no, I really have to go. You say, yeah, I know it's important to you. I feel badly about that. It was a rough week, but you know what? Look for another concert for next week and we'll have the same deal because I know you'll get this. You're smart. You're working on it. I know you'll get this. If you use a punishment by taking something away, kid was going to the concert and you say, can't believe you hit somebody, forget the concert. They're in their room raging about you. I'm going to get back at mom. She's terrible. I hate her. I'll show her who's in charge. If the kid failed to earn the concert and you softly say that, sorry, it was a rough week, but next week you'll get it, and you're showing the positivity, showing the light at the end of the tunnel. That's that same kid lying on his bed, angry at himself, saying, what is up with me? I can't believe I can't control my temper. I really wanted to go to that freaking concert. He let himself down. And again, just like with the first commandment, he's angry at himself as opposed to being in a rage with the parent. I hope that's clear. People often get angry. They're saying, well, don't get the difference between punishment and consequence. State it simply. Punishment is something that creates a feeling of loss of control in the child and rage. And that makes them just go off the walls. That's where you make up something after they screw up. Consequence, you put the power in their hands. They knew the rules. They knew what they needed to do to get to the thing they wanted. And they either get there or they let themselves down. So you get the conflict out of your relationship and into their heads. I hope that's clear. Read the books on this because it's a central tenet of respect-based parenting. And it's a great strategy to use to get them through the whole discipline conundrum.
Great. So we've got a few more comments in the chat before we move on to a different commandment. And you kind of covered this, but just want to ask this specific question if there was anything more. Can you discuss how you would modify this method for teens, as in rewarding for things like being up and ready for school on time, in bed with homework done on time, etc.? So anything that you would change with those day-to-day types of tasks and rewards?
No, I think it's essentially the same thing. And getting up in the morning, by the way, I just wanted to reinforce the whole thing about sleep. They're in pain when they get up. If you study sleep, the last thing that happens when sleep is not rest. Sleep is actually a very complex, proactive set of programs the brain runs at night to rebuild the body and rebuild the brain. At the end of the last program that runs at the end of the sleep cycle, and by the way, you know how many hours of sleep your kid's supposed to be getting as a teenager? Yeah, 9.5. 9.5. What is the average sleep of an American teenager? It's 6 hours or less. And what they miss is an incredibly critical part of sleep program repair that goes on, which is the last stages. The brain pretty much goes through a car wash. It hoses off all toxins and plaques, proteins that build up that are nasty, and runs them through a drain. It cleans up the brain. When we get kids up after they've had 6 hours of sleep, they haven't had the car wash, they are brain toxic. They're trying to function with these toxins in their head. So be patient. That morning thing is just so hard. You know, we're looking as a nation at trying to roll back start times for middle school and high school kids. Where they've done it, it's made a huge difference. But it's very complex, as you can imagine, logistically to set up. So, you know, do what you can with the morning stuff. I would set a reward up, but be ready for a lot of pain of the kid trying to get up after sleeping 6 hours. What you can do is offer a reward to get to bed earlier. There's the trick. And if you go online, you'll read about how to trick your kids into sleeping more. And believe it or not, one of them is to pay them, put them on salary to sleep. That means they have to shut off their screens. That's the rub, because they're addicted to their screens. So you're going to have to come up with something they really want to get them to shut down their screens, say at 9:30 or 10 o'clock at night, which is really where a screen should be off. Screens are caffeine. They wake up the brain, they stimulate it, and it takes a while for the brain to calm down. So you're going to have to pay them to log off the screen. And then what you do is strike a deal saying, look, let's just do this for 2 weeks. You know, you hand in the phone, we shut it down 10 o'clock at night, and I will pay you. And instead, look up sleep hygiene for teenagers. There's a whole bunch of tricks. They can use these tricks. If we have time, I'll go over them at the end. And say, do it for 2 weeks and just keep a log of how you feel the next day on a scale of 1 to 10. 10 being top of the world, 1 being I don't want to be in the world. And the kid will experience feeling better. And over time, within the 2 weeks, they start to feel the difference. And hopefully they become addicted to getting to bed earlier. Their brain will set a clock that makes them feel sleepy earlier in the evening. But you got to bribe them into, oh, I'm not supposed to say bribe. Fellow psychologists, please don't send me those letters and phone calls. We're not allowed to say bribe. You incentivize him. I'm not sure I see the difference, but hey. So you offer him an incentive to try this for a period of time. You say to him, I'm not saying you're going to do this forever. I'm just saying let's do an experiment for 2 weeks and then, you know, you decide. So keep it smaller so it seems more manageable to the kid. Have them earn stuff, go on salary for the 2 weeks to sleep. and then let him develop that value about, yeah, I don't feel so crummy anymore. And a part of the kids who are aggressive at school is they are sleep insufficient, and they're just in that toxic state, and things set them off, and they do lash out physically very often.
So I had two comments kind of roll in. One, this first one is more of a comment that came in when you were talking about consequences. And she stated, also adding in a daughter who is exceptionally hard on herself and really beats herself up when she isn't perfect. And then the second one, so you can kind of tie these in, is when you were talking about the screens, what do you do when a child will not give you their phone to put up for a while? So those two comments, and you can shape them in however.
Okay. The girl that needs to be perfect, um, first of all, females typically all, since the dawn of time, were self-critical, highly self-critical. They're never good enough. We men, we're like way terrific. Um, Often we have our own haunting things, but women in particular just beat the heck out of everybody. That tendency has been magnified by these things, where girls get feedback constantly about how they're not good enough. It's in as a parent in your day, you dealt with muskets with this stuff. Your daughter is dealing with machine guns. Literally, the metaphor holds of rapid fire, constant pounding, exponentially more dangerous. And whenever you hear that girl has to be perfect, all you can do is work on being as positive as you can with her. You can't say, "Oh no, sweetie, you're the most beautiful girl in the school." Don't do that. First of all, it's likely not true. It doesn't matter, but it makes the kid feel worse. What you can do, particularly as a mom, is say, "Yeah, I remember that. I remember that awful. I still feel it." Women can be really critical of each other. The look, as my wife says, the top to bottom, hair to shoes thing. That it's just a terrible thing for teenagers to have to deal with. Again, with the machine guns, the delivery system of this stuff. So sharing your own pain and you know not talking about her, not demanding she talk, but you telling your own stories, and be sure they're true stories. That's great because kids will listen when we talk about our own struggles. They won't listen when we talk about theirs. They often shut down, put up the walls. But if you're just sharing yourself, they will listen to that. They can be helpful. But this is where I would try to find a good, mental health professional for a daughter, because frequently we see this perfectionism run into things like food restriction, a lot of self-loathing. Girls get into the cutting, self-injury stuff a lot. And that's not because they're trying to kill themselves. As one girl told me, "I do this so I don't kill myself." It's a way of medicating themselves because the brain changes when the skin is cut. So I would early on, if you see that in a daughter, I try to find a female therapist that can do the sharing of her own stuff and then help the girl find ways of managing that thing, because it is complex and it's potentially deadly. Um, oh, and then about the screens, back to the bribing, I'm sorry, incentivizing. Uh, just offer to pay kids. You you need to help kids. Again, your mission is not to control their behavior. Your mission is to help them learn to self-regulate, to control themselves. How do you do that? Well, you could start by saying to a kid, "Well, I worry about your screen use. How many hours do you think you put on screens?" He'll say, "Well, I don't know, hour and a half." It's 10 hours, whatever. Say, "Well, tell you what, the screen itself will tell you how much it's used." Say, "Let's put that on and, run it for a week, and then we'll sit down and talk again. I know this takes too much time, but bear with me when you remember your real goal here. And after the week, you take a look at it and you say, wow, looks like you're on 10 hours a day, not 90 minutes. What do you think? Well, that's a lot. What should you do? Well, I'll just, I'll only do like 4 hours this week. And you say, okay, but what should we do if you can't do the 4 hours? Well, I don't know. Maybe, I should, have turn in the phone or shut it down, but I don't want to do that. You say, cool, you don't have to. Let's try another week if you're able to limit it to 4 hours and I'm out of your life. But if you go over that, then how about if I have the phone shut down at certain times of night, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, and we'll do that for a month and then we'll try it again to see if you can self-regulate because that's really what I want. I want to be out of your life, sweetheart. I don't want to be in your life like this, but I love you too much to let you get addicted to the screens. You can't get addicted to screens. I'll tell you what, why don't you research that? I'll research it and we'll share it tomorrow. Because in fact, screens are built to be addicting by what we call dark side psychologists. Get paid a lot of money to people. They did this in the old days with cigarettes. They're doing it with marijuana, a whole nother subject. Um, and they do it with screens. They make the platforms so addicting, kids can't shut them off. So your goal is to help them learn to self-regulate. Sorry, it's a slow slog, but that's the way you get them to self-regulate. You taking the phone away is not going to get it done. And I know we're about done. Did you want to do one more question and then I can do my closing or?
So I had one question, and this might be too heavy of a topic for the time that we have left. But just in honor of Suicide Awareness Month and your comments about self-harm and the stress, kind of that whole impact of the stress that our youth are under right now. Are there clues? Are there suggestions for parents that you could offer just in light of this month that we honor right now and recognition of what our youth are going through?
Okay. Most of the time, there are signs that can occur. There are out of the blue. My apologies to anybody in the audience who's lost a child to this. I just can't imagine that. I would not survive. But there are, we call them out of the blue, where there are no clues. And when we go back, and I'm also a forensic examiner, and one of the sad but important things is if parents are willing, we get a hold of the computers and the phones and interview people to try to learn so we don't lose the next child. And not infrequently, we find there were no clues because of these deadly things. We're finding that a huge number of adolescent suicides can be 50-minute processes. We didn't used to see this, where there's no long trail of clues, but that the kid is reactive and their whole world can collapse very quickly because of the screens. So there are the out of the blues, but there are often clues, precursors, antecedents, things that we see. And that's when you find the child that becomes completely isolated. They do not interact with friends. They do retreat to the room, but they're not even feeling enough energy to fight with you, kind of a thing. There's this despondency or lack of energy. You can find that they give things away, that personal possessions are disappearing. And, you hear people saying, I can't believe she gave away that stuffed animal that was her favorite, things like that. They often share this stuff on the internet, and we're trying to train kids to rat out their friends. And it's something you do want to teach your kid, by the way. She may not be suicidal, but kids have this weird game where they try to stay up all night and talk people out of suiciding. And what you say is if your friend called you up and said, I'm having crushing chest pain and I can't move my left arm and I'm short of breath, would you talk them out of it? Or would you say, oh my God, get to the hospital. Yeah, it's the same thing with suicide. As soon as a kid says, I'm thinking of ending my life, they are demonstrating a life-threatening disease. So train your child, if they're involved in that, to come to you and keep the person on the line or whatever, and then figure out a way to get a message to the police and or to the parents. Your child will say, I can't do that. I would lose my friend. She would never talk to me again. And you say, yeah, unfortunately, this is an important moment because when you have somebody that you care about, a good friend, you have to decide if you love the friend or the friendship more. If what you value is the friendship, you could lose the friend. She might die. And how would you feel going to that funeral thinking, oh my God, I didn't call anybody? So in these situations, as soon as somebody uses the S word, it's time to get us experts involved. Dr. Bradley says all the time, if a kid calls him up and says, I'm going to kill myself, he doesn't guess if the kid is faking it, is only trying to get attention. He says, thanks for calling. The cops will be right there. And I'm in the business. So the first rule is safety. So prepare your child for what she'll see in the world. If it's your child you're worried about, what we say is to ask 3 questions. You want to ease into the discussion. If you just go straight to the chase and say, are you going to kill yourself? Because we'll reflexively say no. Excuse me, running out of voice. You start with saying, sweetie, I can see you're in a lot of pain. Can I ask you a question? So ask if you can ask a question. It lets her know it's a serious question. And almost always they'll say yes, particularly if they're in pain. You say, have you felt so crummy you wished you weren't alive? If she says yes, give her a hug. Excuse me. Say, thanks for saying that. That's hard to say. Have another question. Have you felt so crummy that you thought about ending your life? If she says, yeah, hug her. Say, thanks for telling me that. It takes a lot of courage. Question 3, have you decided how you would do it if you ended your life? If she identifies a method, give her a hug, but immediately go to a crisis center or emergency room. That's red alert level. If she just goes to the second question affirmatively and says, nah, I never thought about how I do it, you're in orange alert. So you stay with her close, but schedule an evaluation by a mental health professional so that you can hit it off that way. So the drill is to ease into this pool so the kid doesn't feel the shock of that, you're going to kill yourself question. That'll shut them down and you won't get to the truth. I'm losing my voice, so I should probably wrap. It's a signal from above. Should I do that, or do you have another question?
That's yes. I think you ended on an incredibly important note, and one that I know is very pressing for a lot of parents these days, as well as friends and other community members. So thank you for touching on those tough subject matter topics, and you can feel free to wrap it up from here, Dr. Bradley. Thank you so much.
Okay, sure. So in summary, I think you get the gist of the overall philosophies that we go through. And as I think I mentioned last time, remember your true ultimate mission. And as parents, we often are saying, yeah, my mission is to make my kid go to a great college. It's not your mission at all. Your mission is to raise the parent of your grandchildren. And you have to have that view. I may have said it before, but it's so important to remind yourself about what's really important. Guys, raising the parent of your grandchildren, this is like as close as we get to touching the face of infinity. We just had our first grandchild, and I'll tell you, it's so humbling to look at my son who survived his terrible years, as your kids will survive. And he's this amazing father. He's so much better a father than I was to him. I am in awe of him. It's just incredible. And I worked hard to do these things. I failed a number of times, but read the section on apology in the Ten Commandments. I always apologize. And I wrote about my own failings where I apologized to my child for those failings. And it's powerful. This stuff works. It's like amazing. And I'll videotape my son with his son. And it's wild to watch. In any event, that's what we're about. So we get so bogged down in thinking our job is to get him a good job that we end up with the negativity. But as I've seen in my son, what we do with our child gets recorded. Not so much what we say, what we do is what they take with them. So what do you want to hand down as the heirloom in the family? The yelling, criticism, judgment, rejection, loneliness? Is that what you want to see in your grandchild and his child one day? How about things like compassion, selflessness, discipline? And when we lose the discipline and lose it, the humility to say, my bad, that should not have happened. I am so sorry, I'm working on it. And to apologize without using the word, but you got to understand and all that stuff, the phrase, because they're not apologies. Apology is my bad. It's my job to keep my temper, to keep my cool. I am so sorry. That was not you, that was me. And you walk away, not expecting a counter apology. These things are so critical and they will be passed down. You may be gone when it gets passed down, but you will be able to leave this world thinking, I did my job, I accomplished the mission. So a couple of tricks I mentioned before, I'll mention them again. My best one is called the deathbed exercise, which I still can't get published because the publishers are saying it's a terrible title. You got to come up with another title. But it is. Before I go crazy on my kids about something, I always think about being on my deathbed and reviewing my life and thinking, how will I feel then about what I'm about to do tonight? Scream and yell, go crazy, really be serving my needs to lash back because I'm scared and upset? Or will I, at the end of my life, say, I'm so glad I punched the heck out of the cabinet in the garage and went in, gave my daughter a hug and say, I love you, but this can't continue. How do we stop this? It's too scary. That's what I hope to have at the end of my time. So use that. It really helps me sober up, get out of my child brain, go to my adult brain, and do much better parenting. And the second is humor. I mentioned before, I think, but if you got to get the cartoons Cindy and I have. We refer to all the time, going through the terrible times with our kids, the fear, the anger, the sleepless nights. I remember it so well. I've earned this silver, by the way, if you can see it. That's not pasted on to impress anybody. That's earned. You check my record. To get through it, you have to also be able to laugh at the time where the last thing you feel like doing is laughing. The cartoon we refer to is two middle-aged parents on opposing couches, and they're both reading books. And the husband raises his head and says to the wife, dear, now that the children are all in jail, maybe we can finally take that trip we always wanted to take. So laugh. That's the last defense for cops and squad cars in a bad neighborhood in the middle of the night and soldiers in foxholes and terrible situations. And parents of teenagers feeling overwhelmed and powerless to keep their kids safe. Keep the partnership with your partner healthy. You are buddies. You get each other through this. And that is a key to getting through it, is the partnership. Don't let the stuff have you turning on each other. And that's it. And again, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I really appreciate your taking the time. One last shot at dumb questions. The questions we didn't get to that you have, ask the questions. Find people with silver on the sides of their head to ask these questions too. This is too important. What you're going through with your teenager might be the most difficult thing and will be the most important thing you will ever do in this world. Thanks for listening.
Thank you. So Dr. Bradley, we've got in the chat just a few thanks so much, and with a lot of S's on that so. And thank you, Dr. Bradley. Really appreciate your time to chat with us. So I just want to echo Dr. Mike and say thank you to everyone who joined us tonight. Thank you to the St. Luke's McCall Foundation for this grant funding in which allowed us to bring Dr. Mike here. And, you know, and I just have to say, we missed out on some commandments, so maybe we can have a part 3 sometime and bring him back and
I'm up for it.
And join
I could
us.
talk forever.
But thanks everyone for asking those questions and being a part of this evening. We will have the recording. It'll take just a little bit of time to get it up and live, but I will send it out to those who registered and those who attended tonight. I know there was some internet issues for some folks, so we will send that out when we have it. So thanks again, and we'll look forward to connecting at another event.